Welcome, everyone. I would like to call this meeting of the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee to order. Please be advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. Presentations and reports considered at this meeting are available on the city's website, and members of the public can contact the clerk's office to acquire documents in an alternative format. As I go through the names, if I can just get everyone to go through our roll call and acknowledge you're here. Councillor Kretsch.
Present.
Janice Brown.
Present.
Karen Burke.
Present.
Graham Carroll.
Present.
Chuck has sent regrets. Lynn Lundstead.
Present.
Robin McKee.
Here.
Tim Ritchie sends regrets, and Will Rosart.
Here.
Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, we have a few changes to today's agenda under delegation requests. Chris Uchiyama, LHC Heritage Planning and Archaeology, Inc., respecting the notice of intention to demolish the building located at 99 Creighton Road, Dundas, being a non-designated property listed on the Municipal Heritage Register, PED 23068 in Ward 13. For the same report, we have Matt Johnston, Urban Solutions Planning and Land Development Consultants. Under consent, we have working group notes for the Policy and Design Working Group of February 13 and the Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee minutes of February 21st.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I see Janice and I see Graham.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, we will move on to our declarations of interest. Are there any declarations today? I will note a declaration for 99 Creighton as the firm that I work for. We will now move on to the approval of the minutes of our previous meeting. Item 4.1 is our February 24th, 2023 meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I see Councillor Kretsch and Graham.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed to the approval of the agenda as amended? Or, no, wrong line. Approval of those minutes. Yes. Yeah. Seeing none, that item is carried. Under delegation requests, we have 2 delegation requests on the agenda for today's meeting. Are there any questions from the committee? If not, may I have a motion to approve the requests?
I see Janice and I see Karen. Lynn, I see Lynn.
And is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried, and we will move on to our delegations. So I'd like to welcome our delegations today. You will each have 5 minutes to speak. We will begin with Chris Uchiyama of LHC Heritage Planning and Archaeology, Inc. Welcome, Chris.
Well, thanks very much. It's much appreciated having this opportunity just to run through a quick presentation. I know you have a very packed agenda today, so I'll try and keep things brief, and then I'm available and Matt will be available to answer any questions on the project and the report. So I'm hoping you're all able to see the slide here. So this is the property in question at 99 and in the project, the study area that we looked at included also 101 Creighton Road in Dundas. Next slide, please. Just to situate ourselves, we've got an air photo and just a topo map showing its location within the city. So it's actually, as mentioned, 2 properties. There's the smaller parcel, that's 99. That's the building that's visible from the road. And then the larger parcel is 101. And then there's that second building that's tucked away behind there from the road. Next slide, please. So LHC was retained way back in November 2021 to prepare cultural heritage impact assessment for the proposed redevelopment of the property. 99 Creighton is listed as a non-designated property under Section 27, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And so our role in this really from the start was to do that background research and do a 906 evaluation and then look at potential impacts as a result of that evaluation. Next slide, please. I won't go into the full history. We did review the history back to the Crown Patent, and we considered also pre-contact history as well. But I'd like to focus in just the key period of interest for us was this 1869 lease to Timothy Greening. So the T. Greening Wire Works was located on this property starting around 1869. It's shown, this picture here is the 1875 atlas that shows the factory. It was believed to be a concrete factory. This was one of two wire works that was run by Timothy Greening and his brother Nathan, the other one being in Hamilton proper around this time. Next slide, please. So a lot of the work that we did involved reviewing not just the documentary evidence, but also a lot of the visual evidence of the property and how it's evolved over time. So not a lot of information from the 1859 atlas. The 75 atlas that you saw the detail of on the previous slide does show the wire works there. Next slide, please. But as we got into the topo maps from the beginning of the 20th century, we're a bit confused because the building isn't depicted on the 1909 topo, nor is it depicted on that 1919 topo. So we did go back and try and recreate the history of the site and try and figure out what happened, because there are references there's a manuscript that references the factory being subdivided into two separate residences around 1903 by John Maw. And so we wanted to figure out what was going on in this property. If you'll go to the next slide, you'll see a series of 20th century air photos. So we went to the National Air Photo Library and went through their entire collection that showed this property to try and figure out, by doing overlays with the existing building locations, the approximate location from the atlas of that the concrete wire factory, to try and figure out how the property had evolved over time. And based on these air photos and the topo map and the documentary evidence, it appears that that residence that is shown, it's very difficult to see, but there is in one of those, the dotted green line that represents that the existing building along the road, there was a residence there that appears to have existed by the 1934 map, but it doesn't appear to have existed at the time of the 1909 topo map. And that appears to be the building that was significantly altered towards the end of the 20th century to be that large building that's visible, the large yellow building that's visible from the road today. Next slide, please. And so this is just an overview of our evaluation based on that information, which is outlined in the HIA that you've been provided to review. So based on our evaluation, there doesn't appear to be an association of the existing building with that factory period, which was really a period of interest. If it were indeed that concrete the wireworks building, it would certainly meet the criteria, but it doesn't appear to have any actual association with that period of use. The residence that's there that appears to be dated to the earliest 20th century has been significantly altered from the exterior and the interior, such that it doesn't meet those criteria for physical and design value at this point. And so our determination was that the property does not meet the Ontario Regulation 906 criteria for determining cultural heritage value or interest under the Ontario Heritage Act. Next slide, please. And so I would be happy to answer any questions that have arisen from the Heritage Report, and Matt's also here to provide answers to questions that may be outside of the scope of that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. As we turn to the committee members, does anyone have any questions for our speaker? Nothing? So again, thank you, Chris. And we will, if there's no questions, we'll move on to our next delegate, which is Matt Johnson from Urban Solutions Planning and Land Development Consultants, Inc.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Matt Johnston, registered professional planner with Urban Solutions. And the purpose of my delegation was really just to be here in support of Chris and her delegation, her presentation. So I don't have anything in particular to present. It was really just here to field any questions that were, as she mentioned, outside the scope of the heritage report she prepared. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that, Matt. So again, we'll open up the floor for any questions from any members. Seeing none, may I have a mover and a seconder to receive our delegations? I need a seconder.
I see Graham and I see Lynn.
Thank you. And as we move to vote on that, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. So again, thank you to our delegates for speaking today. And we will now move on to our staff presentations, item 8.1. So item 8.1 is the Heritage Permit Application HP 2023-005 under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act for the erection of a rear detached accessory structure at 18 Chilton Place in Hamilton, PED 23001 in Ward 2. So we now have Lisa Christie here to give a presentation on this report.
Hey, hi, everyone. Thank you. Just give me a second to share my screen, please. Thanks. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I'm Lisa Christie, one of the cultural heritage planners with the City of Hamilton, and I'm presenting staff report PED 23001, which recommends the approval of the heritage permit for the property located at 18 Chilton Place. So this property is located at 18 Chilton Place within the Durand-Markland Heritage Conservation District. The property consists of a 2.5-story red brick dwelling in vernacular Queen Anne style of architecture with Romanesque influences and a side driveway.
Lisa?
Yeah.
Pardon the interruption. Can you just raise your voice for the folks in the room, please?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, so new construction within a heritage conservation district must obtain council approval, which is why we're seeing this application today. So this is an overall site plan for the property. The subject property is outlined in yellow, and the proposed location for the new development is outlined in red. So as you'll see, it's located directly behind the existing house, and the location has limited views from the public right-of-way. I'd also note that the adjacent property has a similar structure in a similar location, which is just here, if you could see my mouse. So the proposal for this heritage permit is the construction of a new detached 1.5-story accessory structure at the rear of the property for use as garage and storage. It will include a new concrete pad and foundation, new cedar siding and asphalt shingles, new casement windows with black trim, and new exterior staircase to the second level of the garage, as well as a gable roof with a north-facing dormer and installation of solar panels on the south roof. So this heritage permit did go to Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee on February 21st, and HPRS was generally supportive of the proposal and staff's recommendations. So we'll take a look at some existing conditions. So visible is the existing shed. The proponent plans to move the existing shed to a different property. It's not contemporary to the house and is not a heritage feature. Note that the siding visible on the rear addition of the house is the proposed material for the accessory structure. It's not a dwelling. The existing concrete pad will be removed, and then the solar panels, which are visible on the shed roof just here, will be reinstalled on the garage on the same elevation. And then the garage door will face the laneway, which is just here. So this is another overall site plan. Chilton Place to the right of the screen on this side. And the laneway to the north top of the screen is the only area where the shed may be visible from the public right-of-way. So if you see the red sight line. And then the other sight line that may be possible is the green highlighted sight line. This is highly obstructed view from the public right-of-way, though, as the street has many mature trees and mature gardens as well. So this is a primary elevation which would face the laneway and would be most likely visible from the public right-of-way. And it features a central dormer which is compatible with the existing roof lines in the neighborhood. The exterior materials are distinct but historically appropriate and clearly demonstrate that the accessory building is new. And the cedar siding would match the existing rear addition. So this is the east and west elevations. The pitch of the roof reflects the roof line of the existing dwelling, and sample doors and windows are still to be provided, though we do know they plan to do casement windows with black trim, which is consistent with the style of windows on the existing house and rear addition. So the side elevation on the east, the side elevation facing the east may also be visible from the public right-of-way. So you would probably just see a small portion of the dormer, and the doorway here from the laneway. And then this is the south elevation. So not pictured in this elevation would be the solar panels, which are proposed to be reinstalled. And this elevation is not visible from the street and will have no visual impacts on the Durand-Markland Heritage Conservation District. So staff consider the design to be compatible with the guidelines laid out in the Durand-Markland Heritage District Plan. The proposed design and materials incorporate features that are sympathetic to the character of the area. They reflect the existing rear addition of the property, and they respect the district's guidelines that new buildings not attempt to replicate historical facades. Heritage staff are recommending that the heritage permit be approved, subject to the approval of any required Planning Act applications and the 3 conditions below, which is that final details regarding the windows and garage doors be submitted for approval, minor changes be submitted to staff for review, and the standard 2-year completion time. Thanks, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. So if there are questions, we'll start a speakers list. So I see Janice first. Is there any other questions? Go ahead, Janice.
Thank you, Lisa, through the chair. I know this property quite well, and as far as sightlines, you are right. Even at the front, the southerly side, not only are there trees, but it is heavily landscaped, so it is very difficult to see that garage. And you did show a diagram of a garage that, and this was a new construction at some time in Durand, in the district. No, it's not in the district, sorry. It's out of the district, but it's on Markland at Bay, and it certainly is attractive enough, and I'm sure the folks that are there would do a very good job because they do maintain that property beautifully. My only question is, that laneway that leads into the garage, both people, both houses, 18 and might be 16, I don't know if they number them every 2 or every 4, but they share that laneway in order to go into their so-called backyards. Now, is that laneway considered public or private? Because beyond there, prior to the 1994 Heritage Conservation District Durand-McNabb, there was a laneway that went from Markland all the way to the end of Chilton and exited at a house on Aberdeen. And then parts of that got closed off with a new development, and parts of it was closed off by somebody that just closed it off. So my question, what's happening to those laneways? Because on the other side of Chilton, those laneways are all open to the public and you can pass through them.
Right, so the laneway in question for this property, sorry, through the chair, is it ends at another property, so it's not, I believe it's private and is not accessible. It doesn't move any further than those properties. That's where it ends, and it does not continue any further.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions in regards to the presentation? If none, may I have a motion to receive the presentation?
I see Councillor Crutch and I see Janice.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, we will now move on to the report. So we have before us the recommendations that Lisa had outlined in her presentation and that you have before you. I may have a mover and a seconder to put the recommendations on the floor.
I see Karen and I see Graham.
Before we vote, are there any questions Any comments from members? If not, as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Item 8.2 is our recommendation to designate 115 to 117 George Street, Hamilton, under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, PED 23027, Ward 2. So we have with us Chloe Richet is here to present, make a presentation on the report of PED 23027. Welcome, Chloe.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Chloe Richet, one of the cultural heritage planners with the city, and I'm presenting staff report PED 23027, which recommends the property at 115 to 117 George Street be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Okay, so as the map here indicates, the property is located on the corner of George Street and Queen Street in Hamilton's central neighborhood. The property is comprised of semi-detached units forming a two-story former residential building constructed circa 1871, which was adapted in the 1970s for commercial purposes. And this slide shows some background information on the property's addition to the Municipal Heritage Register, as well as related Planning Act applications. The city listed the property on the register in 2014. Urban Hamilton official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications were received proposing the 23-story mixed-use commercial residential building for lands located at 220 and 222 Main Street West, just south of the building at 115 to 117 George Street. Public consultation for these Planning Act applications has occurred. As part of the Cultural Heritage Impact Assessment review that was done by the Inventory and Research Working Group, the property was recommended to be added to the former staff designation work plan. Staff were granted permission to enter the property, including the interior, and so I had conducted a site visit in January 2023. I'd also like to note the owner is supportive of the proposed Part 4 designation. And finally, just last month, Council had approved the Planning Act applications for the property. In preparation for this report, as I noted, I conducted a site visit of the property, including the interior. I reviewed the Cultural Heritage Impact Assessment prepared for the property, which included research and a cultural heritage valuation using Ontario Regulation 906. I drafted a revised final statement of cultural heritage value or interest, and I worked with the owner to ensure that they and their heritage consultants were comfortable with this final revised statement, and that included the list of heritage attributes. It's been determined that the property meets 4 of the 9 criteria contained in Ontario Regulation 906. Next, I'll outline the cultural heritage value of the property. This property is a representative example of the Gothic Revival style of architecture through its side gable roof with 2 projecting front gables with pointed arch window openings below and paired wood brackets below the projecting roof eaves. The property does not meet the 2 other design or physical value criteria. Sorry about that delay. The property is associated with entrepreneur and industrialist John Moody, known as one of the 5 Johns who were celebrated for their role in bringing hydropower into Hamilton from the distant site of Deque Falls. And Moody was an early owner of the property. Further, the property illustrates the theme of growth and commercial prosperity in the city of Hamilton in the late 19th century. The final 2 historical or associative value criteria are not met. And finally, the property helps define the character of the historic Hess Village streetscape, marking the entrance to George Street from Queen Street South. The building faces George Street and is an integral component of Hess Village, comprised of a number of low-rise buildings dating to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many of which were successfully rehabilitated for mixed use in the 1970s. And the building's also a sister design to the adjacent semi-detached brick building at 107 to 109 George Street, believed to have also been constructed circa 1871 by John Moody. And this property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act that occurred in 1985. Further, the property is physically, functionally, historically, and visually linked to its surroundings. It is not considered to be a local landmark. So in summary, the property at 115 to 117 George Street is comprised of a 2.5-story brick building. The design is representative of the vernacular Gothic Revival style of architecture, and it's associated with entrepreneur and industrialist John Moody and the growth and commercial prosperity of the city of Hamilton in the late 19th century. The property helps define the character of the historic Hess Village streetscape and is physically, functionally, visually, and historically linked to its surroundings. Please note this is a condensed version of the full Statement of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest, and the full version can be found in Appendix B of the staff report. Important to the conservation of 115 to 117 George Street are the front and side elevations, with the historic elements and decorative details present on these elevations. Please note the modified first-story front or north elevation, the south rear elevation, and the rear wings, as well as interior features, are not considered to be heritage attributes. And in addition, important to the conservation of 115 to 117 George Street are the setback placement as an entrance to George Street from Queen Street South and orientation to the front or north elevation facing George Street. Thank you for your attention, and I'll take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Chloe. Do we have any committee member questions?
I believe Robin wishes to speak.
Go ahead, Robin.
Thank you, Chair. With the recommendation of a designation, could we also add that the developer add the designated property plaque to the building?
Through the chair, Alyssa Golden, Cultural Heritage Program Lead. Certainly this committee can make a recommendation to encourage that take place. The Planning Act process in terms of the zoning bylaw and official plan amendment has already been completed, but there will be subsequent applications, I believe, in terms of site plans. So that is something that staff can also investigate as a part of that process if this committee would like to make a suggestion for staff to do so.
I would like to make that suggestion.
Would we have a seconder for that? Graham?
I see Graham. Sorry, I see Graham as a seconder of the amendment.
Janice, you have a question?
Yes, just through the chair, just a quick question. With regard to the site plan application that will be coming forward, will that heritage property, the facade at the front and the facade at the back, will that go through any design approval to ensure that it is complementary, I suppose, to 107 and 109, since they are like sister buildings? Thank you.
Through the chair, staff do provide cultural heritage comments on site plan applications. I have had very good communication with the agent for the owner about, they want to be communicative about their vision, and they do have a conservation plan that will be submitted to staff. I'm not in receipt of the conservation plan yet, but I would expect it would talk about, what the best conservation practices would be, and we'll certainly take that sister building into consideration when providing any further direction.
Through the chair, thank you for that, Chloe. I look forward to that and will follow closely. And I suppose that's because there was a building on Hess Street that went down. I don't know if it was a fire or collapse. I cannot remember. It was a number of years ago. And the building that is standing there now, I have no idea how that happened. And I would hate to see that happen on this part of George Street. So I think that is a very important consideration. Thank you.
Through the chair, in terms of the distinction between this file and the one that you're referring to, Janice, in this case, we will be designating the property. So once that takes place, there would also be a heritage permit process for any impact to heritage features. And then to further elaborate on Chloe's comment in terms of the conservation plan, that's actually tied to a holding provision as well. So there is a requirement for that work to take place and for staff to approve it. And it would include any provisions in terms of what the overall design would be for rehabilitation and development of the property.
Are there any other questions? If not, may I have a mover and a second? Oh,
I believe Robin.
oh, Robin? Oh, go ahead, Robin.
What's the impact to this designated property by the development to the south on Main Street? And how close will that development get to this designated property? What's the gap in between?
Through the chair, Ken Coit, Director, Heritage and Urban Design, responsible for site plan. I can't give you the exact number, Robin, but the intent is there would be a lane between the heritage building and the new proposed building, and the developers intend very much to respect the heritage character of George Street and the independence of those two structures.
Thank you.
Any other further questions? If not, may I have a mover and a seconder to receive staff's presentation?
A little slow on the. I see. I'm not wearing my glasses today, which is the problem. I see Karen and I see Lynn.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, we move on to the report. So we have before us the recommendations as well as the amendment being recommended by MHC. Lorraine, did you want to deal with those separately or together?
If we could deal with the amendment first. If I'm understanding correctly, there'll be a little bit of renumbering of the current recommendation. So the first paragraph will be subsection I and then AB underneath. And then there'll be a new subsection 2. You'll see this in the report. And my proposed wording is that the staff be directed to investigate the addition of a designated heritage plaque to be added by the developer of the property. Sound okay?
Yep. Robin, would that satisfy your request?
I said it a little fast. Thank you, Robin.
Yep, no, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, so Robin's put that forward. We had a seconder. Yes, so as we vote on the amendment, is there anyone opposed? Being none. And now we move on to the vote for the report. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendations before you and staff's report?
I see Graham and I see Councillor Cratch.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. We now move on to our consent items. So we have several consent items on our agenda today, everything from 9.1 through to 9.3. Do we have any questions in regards to any of these specific items? We have some delegated approvals. We have some meeting notes from our working groups. If there's no questions or comments, may I have a mover and a seconder to receive the items?
I see Janice and I see Graham.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? And we now move on to our discussion items. So our first discussion item is item 10.1, is Council's initiative to repeal designation bylaws under Section 31 of the Ontario Heritage Act for vacant properties at 14 Belvedere Avenue and 14 Mary Street in Hamilton, PED 23038 in wards 2 and 8. May I have a mover and a seconder to may I have a mover and a seconder to put the recommendations on the floor?
I see Janice and I see Robin.
And in regards to this item, is there any questions?
Do have a comment.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I'm happy to support the removal of the designation to the property on Belvedere, the former Bellevue, now that that property owner has sold it finally. I would not have rewarded him for what he did by removing the designation.
Is there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we've got our mover and our seconder, and as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. We will now move on to item 10.2.
Okay. This is the notice of intention to demolish the building located at 99 Creighton Road, Dundas, being a non-designated property. We have a mover and seconder to put the recommendations on the floor.
I see Janice and I see Robin.
Are there any questions?
No question. Oh, Councillor Crutch. Councillor Crutch.
It's not a question, it's just that I wanted to let everyone know I spoke to Ward 13 councillor, and they and I both understand what the recommendations are in the staff report, and just want to communicate that, that's all.
Thank you. So if not, we will vote on the recommendations before. Oh. Go ahead, Rob.
Is there a site plan for this site before the demolition? Because the prior notice that we just did was about two demolitions, and there hasn't been any build on either one of them, especially Mary Street where the theater went down. I never heard of any kind of site plan or anything that was going to be built there. It was just demolished, and now it's empty. Now, the idea here is that why is there no plan for the building that is going to replace the demolition?
Through the chair to Robin. So a little bit of different situations between the designated properties that you're referencing that were unfortunately demolished, but the bylaws not repealed, versus in this case where we have a listed property on the register, had been flagged as having some heritage value or interest. There's a requirement that they give advance notice of intention to demolish. The applicant owner did provide a formal consultation application for proposed redevelopment of the site. To date, though, we haven't received the actual following Planning Act applications or any building permits related to that. However, in spite of there being an approved application for redevelopment, the process would still be that we receive notice of their intention to demolish. The property has been, as staff pointed out in their staff report, appropriately assessed, determined that does not have heritage value or interest and warrants being removed from the register.
Thank you for that clarification. But this is a removal from the registration, and the other one was the removal of designations. And there's no site plan. So this is just an intent to demolish, not a demolition permit. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Robin, that's correct. So this is addressing the process under the Ontario Heritage Act to give notice of intention to demolish, and we're reviewing that and have made a recommendation that it does not meet heritage value or interest and warrants being removed from the register, and that is separate from an actual building permit application process to demolish.
So we will have a demolition permit come to us again.
Through the chair to Robin, no, so that would be a separate process. If this were, I'm just trying to think, in terms of the Planning Act process, if there were still heritage considerations that required a heritage impact assessment, there might be some discussion at policy and design. But once this property is removed from the register, there would be no additional process under the Heritage Act that would come through this committee regarding the property.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you very much.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, so if not, we'll have a vote on the recommendations before us. Is anyone opposed? No, so it carries.
Thank you, Graham. As we move on to our general information and other businesses, are there any, so we'll move on to our list of properties and buildings and landscapes. Are there any additions to our list? Okay, and we'll also be looking for updates as well. So if we want to start our speakers, we'll start with Will, Karen, and then is there anyone else that would like to provide updates? Janice and Graham.
If I'm correct, the Church of the Ascension on John and Forest is not on our list. There is a sign on it now available, and according to Facebook, it's just the Sunday school, but a listing by the real estate company leaves the impression that the whole church is available. So I think we ought to add that one to the list.
Just to staff, was there any update or any comments in regards to Church of Ascension?
Just through the chair, just to, obviously, if it's in some state of change, it would be the committee's prerogative to monitor it. It is a designated property as well. There is an Ontario Heritage Easement Agreement that also protects the property. But obviously, if there's some state of change in terms of ownership, and this committee would like to monitor that, that would be up to your discretion.
It's actually a National Historic Site, I understand.
Through the chair, yes, I believe it is as well, although National Historic Site recognition does not provide any actual protection for the property.
Thank you.
So will you like to put that motion forward?
Yes, please.
Do we have a seconder to add to the list? Okay. And as we vote on that, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, so we'll add that to our property list. Are we looking at yellow? We need to address that color.
Yeah, it's kind of questionable where it's at and where it's going.
I would suggest yellow because it says it's undergoing some type of change, such as change in ownership or use,
Okay.
but not perceived as being immediately threatened. That would be my suggestion.
And we also need to assign someone temporarily, at least until the new committee has been formed.
I have Rostrick House around the corner, so I'll add it.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
And that doesn't stop you, Will, from, if you notice, if you have any observations that you want to?
No, just the realtor seems to be advertising, the whole place, not just the Sunday school. Anyway, there's a list, a brochure online, and I couldn't access it, but somebody else might, and find out more.
Through the chair, if I may have an address. Staff will send it. Thank you.
And actually, just while you're still on the microphone there, at our last meeting, we discussed 1 Main Street West, which is the former BMO and the Gallons building.
Right.
It was brought forward as a suggestion that we remove that property from our list because it's in a stable situation. Maybe staff would like to.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
It was suggested that 1 Main Street, so the Gallons building,
Yeah.
be removed from the list because it's stable. There's no threat of.
Gowings is moving out. That kind of makes it unstable. They're moving out to Innovation Drive, I believe.
It was suggested that they weren't moving it into the list.
Through the chair, perhaps, I can't recall who had brought up the recommendation to remove it from the watch list.
I believe it was Tim.
Oh, okay.
Leave it. Okay.
I think it's too important a building to just take off. Anyway.
On the list, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will leave 1 Main Street West on the list until we have further information. Karen, you're next on our list of speakers.
Thank you. Matt, did you get that photograph? Okay, thank you. So I would like to propose this new property for consideration. It's 6 Tally Ho Drive in Dundas. It's in the Highland Hills area. It's in the Highland Hills area. It backs onto the Spring Creek Conservation Area. And it's a 2-story farmhouse built apparently mid-1800s. It was the first house in the area. And in the 1950s, a lot of the farm was converted into housing. And so that's, it's a full survey now, but that was the original house. It's just recently, as of last week, been put on the market. And it's for just under $4 million, and it's just under 2 acres. It is very prime real estate. If you know about the area, a lot of buildings have been taken down recently and replaced with bigger buildings, new homes, and this is prime for that kind of development. So for me, I consider that at risk. It also has many mature trees on the area, over 100 years old, according to the listing. So my recommendation is that it be added to the register and considered for designation quickly. I'm not clear actually on declaration of interest because I do live in this neighborhood, so I just want you to know that. So if I have to recuse myself from any voting, that's fine. But I did want to bring this to the attention of the committee. Okay? And in fact, the listing says, you know, you could enjoy the historic estate lifestyle or build your own dream home with endless possibilities. So, you know, it's being advertised as such. Thank you.
So the recommendation being put forward was to add to register and potential for designation. Would staff like to address how we're moving forward with recommendations?
So, yes, so the Bill 23 changes that we discussed at length last week will actually be going to council this week on Wednesday for approval. So they're not yet in place, but recognizing that we're anticipating that will be coming into effect later this week. Generally, we would be looking to only list properties when they're under immediate threat of potential demolition or some sort of prescribed event Planning Act application. So just recognizing that potential risk, keep that in mind in terms of whether this committee would like to make that recommendation, because once a property is listed on the register, now it's automatically removed after 2 years. So if there is no trigger, there's that potential gap in coverage unless staff are able to bring forward a recommendation to designate. A potential alternative might be to instead refer this to inventory and research for a continued conversation and for staff to do some initial preliminary research. Because also when we do bring forward listings for the register, there should be a statement that confirms that it meets at least one of the criteria under Ontario Regulation 906. So there's some initial information that you've been kind enough to outline, but we would need to flesh that out to make sure that that's clearly been confirmed before council would make a recommendation for listing. So recognizing there isn't an active application, I do understand the state of change. It might be more applicable to maybe have it discussed at inventory and research and determine what the right, I guess, next steps might be. But I will leave that up to you folks to decide what you see fit.
Should we be monitoring the status of the sale, so that as soon as it sells, then does that put more urgency?
Go ahead, Jen.
Just through the chair and to Karen, actually, I was going to suggest that. I think that we have time to see what happens. I think the price you said was $4 million. That's a hefty amount. And we might be able to determine whether or not it should be moved forward to designation once we determine who purchases the place, whether it be an individual homeowner or perhaps a developer that has 2 acres to develop on for infill. That would be and I have no problems with it coming to inventory and research, and perhaps Karen might work with us and we could head to the Dundas Archives and find all sorts of information. Thank you.
Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you. There's one more piece of information. I know several years ago, there actually was activity to sever it into 3 lots, which would also, and I believe that went through, but they didn't do anything with the property at that point. But so, you know, 3 lots divided up over $4 million is not that much for Dundas.
So Karen, I guess in the interim, did you want to propose adding it to the watch list?
Yes, if I may, that was another recommendation.
And then forward it on to inventory and research for review?
Thank you, we'll do that. You can put my name beside that one.
And yellow as the red? Red?
Is it red? Okay.
So if I may, through the chair, so what you'll see in the minutes and the report will be that 6 Tally Ho Drive be added to the red list in more fulsome language, and then it also be referred, the information on the property be referred to inventory and research working group.
So Karen's put forward that motion. Do we have a seconder? Janice?
I see Graham.
Graham? And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed to that? Seeing none, that item is carried. So thank you for watching that, Karen, and we'll keep on top of that one. Next, we have Janice going through your updates.
Through the chair, thank you very much. Good news. First, I'm at Endangered Buildings, 6668 Charlton Avenue West. It successfully went through planning and is now going to council for ratification on Wednesday. So that's a plus. This question through the chair to Councillor Kretsch. I just wondered if you've had any success with 98 James Street South and the back 40 that is in shambles. If there's any update, were you able to talk with anybody about what might happen to that property? That might even be in relationship to what might be happening with the permit that goes until March 31st, if there's been any update, and that would go to Steve. So sort of two questions there. Thank you.
Yes and no. So I began undertaking an exercise of some kind with staff. I say that because I've just emailed them, that's the exercise. And we're having a discussion about what to do with the back 40, so to speak, because right now it's in a weird state. I'm having a bit of deja vu, so I'm not sure if I've already said this here before, so apologies if this is repetitive, but there's now some kind of archaeological issue there, like quasi-archaeological. What I mean is I made that up, by the way. What I mean by that is that it used to just be a collection of bits that was out the back, right? The bits collected and they were just sat there. But over time, of course, soil and other kinds of things have allowed things to grow, and now it's like a mass, right? So it's not like and some of the bits, which may have been preservable or somebody might have cared about, are now kind of hidden in the mass. So there's some notion or idea that like, oh, it's not as easy to clean this up as it might have been initially. There'd be a little bit more just thought put into that. That's my only understanding. But I'm pushing the conversation forward to hopefully have it cleaned up and then potentially have the city use that space for something, ideally like a green space until there's been a development. So that's what I've put forward, like just by email. And so I'm going back and forth with staff right now to talk to them about that. No answer yet as to what's going to be done there, but like that's what I'm trying to pursue.
Through the chair, thank you for that, Councillor. I'll come back and ask another question, probably to staff, once I hear my second question from staff. Thank you.
Through the chair to Janice. So in terms of the heritage permit application, if I understood the second part of your question, so they did receive a 3-month extension, which will end on March 31st. We have had some good initial conversations with the new owners and their agents, and we've received at least an initial crack monitoring report. We're just waiting for a larger overall condition update over the site and are in the process of preparing hopefully another extension, recognizing that they've made progress in terms of their monitoring on the site. And we will, as per previous conversations with this committee, look to release those monitoring reports as well on the agenda for the committee's information.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you, Alyssa. That was a question that I would have asked of you, if we could see those monitoring reports, because I think there hasn't been one in a very, very, very long time. Now, my third concern about this property, I just hate to keep going over it, but it's been a marathon. There was a conservation report that was prepared by McCallum Sather, and in that report, they listed all the heritage attributes that were to be salvaged and saved. I no longer have a copy of that, and I have no idea where it's gone to. But is that conservation report and the salvaging of those attributes and where they're supposed to be stored still valid? Thank you.
Through the chair to Janice, actually, that's part of what we'd be looking for in terms of an updated report from the new owners, is understanding what state the salvaged items are in that were originally identified in the conservation plan. And just to the councillor's other comment in terms of the back 40 area and some of the debris there, I know that when they were doing the demolition, there was, from what I understand, an earlier collapse than was expected. So there might be some debris in there that originally was hopefully going to be salvaged, but wasn't because of the how the demolition took place in terms of just the instability of the building at the time. But the items that were properly formally salvaged were actually moved and are stored and stacked on site safely. So our understanding as staff at this moment is anything that's in the rear, that's in the pile of debris, would not be at this point included in their list of features for salvaging.
Thank you, Alyssa, for that. And through the chair, just one other point, and I really cannot recall where I read this, but I understood that there were also salvaged items that were being stored at the front of the church. Now, because of the hoardings, I cannot see those, and there's a lot of vegetation that has grown up over the top. And that's just comment, and perhaps somebody would investigate that as well, since it's somewhere that I read.
Thank you, Janice.
I'm still moving on. Oh. Okay, here we go. I'm still moving on, sorry. Good news about 56 Charlton Avenue West. And just a concern, I'm going back to, I guess this is through the chair to Councillor Kretsch again. Has there been a decision on the southwest crossing that includes oh my gosh, all those properties along Main Street between Hess and Queen Street, including 5456 Hess Street South and the two Victorians on Queen Street, because the last time it was in camera and I've heard nothing. Thank you.
Yeah, if you don't mind being slightly more clear, what do you mean exactly about the crossing? Sorry, I'm not able to just like wrangle this in my brain immediately.
I'm sorry, my fault. Southwest Crossings, this is a cultural heritage landscape that is made up of 5456 Hess Street South, to the best of my ability, and the stretch of Victorians stretch from, it's in the report, on the Colaterra development, and 207 right to 231 Main Street West, and it's on the corner, large Victorians between Queen and Hess, and they are part of the downtown secondary plan, and it was appealed by the developer, and it went into camera at one of your council meetings, and there was nothing because it was in camera. So my question is there anything now, or is it still in camera, or is there no decision? Thank you.
My understanding is the information still from the closed session remains confidential. Your best bet, and I think the best thing to do is, once those reports, now this is not very obvious and easy, so it's a fair enough question. Once those reports become public, it's not as if you or I get notified of these reports have become public now. Maybe I do, I doubt it. But the idea that they become clear. So what I would do is I simply follow up with staff to check in on that, because I don't have an answer. Like, I'm not notified when the matter becomes public. It's just sort of said, when it does, it shall be.
Thank you, Councillor Kretsch, for that. I appreciate it. But the only reason I brought it forward again is that you were in camera, and you were the one that said it was in camera, and I had no idea it was in camera. So I'm just trying to get to the bottom of it. Thank you.
I think maybe just to help in terms of getting to the bottom of it, maybe a staff could just comment on the reason why it was in camera, like the nature of the reason why it was in camera, so that we can sort of just maybe close that loop and understand the timeline for when it will be coming forward.
Through the chair, Ken Coit, Director of Heritage and Urban Design. It is before the OLT, so it stays in camera to defend the city's negotiation ongoing. It will be made public as soon as presentations are made to the OLT. Oops, they have to book a date and move it forward.
I thought that had already been done, through the chair. I guess it's time to look back at this file and find out exactly where it is. Thank you.
Janice, did you have any other updates on properties? No, all done. Okay. And Graham, go ahead.
Well, mine is once again about St. Giles Church. It has been broken into again. I mean, it's the 5th time. The police did not get there in time to catch the person inside the building. I guess one went in the front door and the other guy's been out the back. So it's getting pretty bad. I think it was about a week and a half ago it was broken in. I got the exact date by email. I went down to take a look at the building on Friday to see if it was secure, and I could not see any way for people to get in from the public right away. There's still some windows you can't see unless you actually get on the property, but as we know, that's a no-no. But the east alcove is again full of litter. So you gotta, to me, that's just a fire waiting to happen when you see all that litter and debris building up. So they really got to get on top of that. Keep on, they got to monitor the Kindred's Works, I think is the name of the firm that's looking after it now. But hopefully they will get on top of that one of these days. And that's it for me, thanks.
Go ahead, Alyssa.
Thanks through the chair to Graham. So staff, recognizing this being raised, will reach out to our colleagues in Municipal. Cut me off. Reach out to our colleagues in Municipal Law Enforcement about it, but I would encourage if
Apparently MLE is.
I'll try this one. As soon as you see that kind of activity happening, please reach out directly to Municipal Law Enforcement, so they can take more immediate action. We do appreciate also being in the loop and knowing what's happening, but it's really they have the authority to enforce and follow up on those types of complaints. So, so yes, please, as early. If as early as possible, if you could reach out, we'd appreciate it.
My apologies. Just to advise that, yeah, so on March 15th is when the OLT hearing occurred relating to the settlement proposal. The settlement proposal was presented to the tribunal, and the tribunal issued an oral order approving the settlement, and a written decision will be forthcoming. So I've just asked the city solicitor, Mr. Patrick McDonald, for what additional details either myself or the ward councillor can provide to the community in the neighborhood. And as soon as we have that information that we can share with everyone, we will make that available. I just needed Mr. McDonald's consent or direction as to how to proceed on it, or what can be obtained from the OLT website. But it does provide for the protection of the heritage buildings on Queen Street and Main Street. The buildings on the Doors Pub, they were not, although they were included in the original appeal, they were not they ultimately were determined not to be part of the application, so they were in no way affected or altered in terms of their heritage status. But I can tell you that heritage was one of the primary driving concerns throughout the negotiations to preserve the buildings, either all or in part, as well as, like I said, the Queen Street properties. It was agreed to remove them from any development concept to provide for the long-term retention of the ones I refer to as the Doors Pub. I can't remember their exact address, but I think they're the ones, yeah, on Hess Street. That is correct. So it effectively related to the properties on Main and Queen, and Hess Street properties were not part of the appeal or the redevelopment concept. And as soon as we can make Mr. McDonald confirms, we will make sure that the ward councillor and the members of the committee can, whatever we can share with you in terms of development concepts and the specific natures of the details, we will share that information with everyone. I apologize for interjecting. Thank you.
No, it was a good interjection through the chair. Thank you very much. And the DNA will be pleased to learn of whatever the settlement is and the fact that heritage is utmost of concern in that particular appeal. Thank you.
Sorry, I might just, Mr. McDonald's advice, he did indicate that a written decision will be forthcoming, so if there's any delay, we might be just waiting for the OLT to provide that written decision and confirmation. But in the meantime, like I said, I have asked Mr. McDonald what either myself or the ward councillor can advise the community on. Thank you.
No, that's great, thank you. Do we have any other first-time speakers for updates on properties? Robin, go ahead, and then Lorraine, if we could add Will for second round comments.
Thank you,
Go
Chair.
ahead, Robin.
Yep. I'm looking at yellow, and it's 77 King Street West, Battlefield House. I don't remember why it was put on that. And I think it was because the potential name change of the National Historic Site, and nothing has come from that anymore. So I don't think it's in danger anymore. So I'm recommending it be removed.
Okay. So Robin's putting forward a motion to remove 77 King Street, Battlefield House. Does anyone have any comments or questions on that? If not, can we have a seconder to remove it? Oh, go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Karen.
Through the chair, I think that this might relate to a development proposal that came in for that whole entire area, of which Battlefield House is very close to what was being proposed, which was some very multi-story condos and things.
Yeah, that was to the east of it.
To the west, Robin.
Across 20. But there also is a development where the pizza place is to the east. At least there was.
Yeah, through the chair, I just recall that I think we thought that there might be a possibility that Battlefield House could be impacted by the proposed development, that's all.
If that's the case, then we can leave it and see what happens.
So Robin, what would you like to do?
I'll withdraw.
Withdrawing?
Yeah, I'll withdraw. And the other one is Claremont Lodge, the gatehouse of Akmar. It's not a update, but it's a question to staff. Where in the designation process in the next 2 years, does that stand or sit?
Through the chair to Robin, so I believe we did chat about this at length at the last meeting as well. So it is on the high priority list that we're looking to do in the next 2 years, but there is not currently a ranking of that list. Staff are in the process of hiring the 2 temporary contract staff that we had budget for to coordinate the expedited designation work over the next 2 years. That posting is closing just next week. So we're hoping to be interviewing and have folks on board soon, and then we can really get started in earnest in the designation process to get through that high priority list of 60 properties, which includes Claremont Lodge.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other first-time speakers? If none, we'll go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. Through the chair, can staff advise what's happened to 2024 King Street East? Are they developing it or just staying and going nowhere?
Through the chair, are you referring to the Gore buildings, 18 to 24? So we have been having some conversations. At this point, though, we don't have, the conditions have not been cleared of their heritage permit application. There's a requirement for them to enter into a heritage easement agreement and also provide securities before work is underway. There were some slightly revised plans that were submitted as a part of their site plan application process just in the fall. But unfortunately, we haven't yet, I guess, been able to move forward in terms of completion of those plans. So at this point, we're not sure what the timing will be in terms of that moving forward with the proposal and the approved heritage permit application.
Do they have a permit with a deadline or?
Through the chair, yes. Like most of our heritage permit applications, there is an expiry date. I don't have it off the top of my head. I believe it is later this year. But we have been working towards them clearing their conditions so that they can move forward with the required building permit applications.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other property updates? If not, we've come to the end of our property updates, and we'll move on to our item 13.2. So I'm just going to...
Madam Chair, pardon the interruption.
Oh, sorry.
Motion to receive the information.
Oh, okay. You want to do it separate? That's no problem. Motion to receive the information.
I see Graham and I see Janet.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. So relinquishing chair for the next two items, it's 13.2 is the Heritage Day update. So for Heritage Day, I had the honor of being asked to come and speak at the event that was put together at the Coach House at Dundurn Castle. So there was a few of our members who were in attendance, but it was a fairly decent turnout. I think maybe there was about 40 or 50 people. Maybe am I overestimating too many? Too many? We didn't do a count, but there was a number of great speakers that were there, thanks to the organizers from the city as well as the Hamilton Wentworth Heritage Association. What I was asked to speak was to introduce Municipal Heritage Committee, but also to outline some of the challenges that we're facing, especially with Bill 23. And there was a number of people in the room that had no idea how Bill 23 was affecting our heritage resources. And you saw those aha moments. And we had a lot of questions for myself as well as from other members. Member of Provincial Parliament, Monique Taylor, was present, and she reached out to us with interest in order to get some more information and to be able to write something that she could move on. And so I haven't had any further communications, but something that we're working on with interest. She wanted to know more so that they could have communications, because as a member of Parliament, she had no idea the impacts that Bill 23 is having on our heritage resources. They hear all of the other components of the Greenbelt and affordable housing, but as one aspect that she was not aware of. The other thing that she did mention to me and wanted to extend was to the Municipal Heritage Committee. They had no idea the amount of work that's actually on the shoulders of our committee members at a volunteer level. Did not know that we, the frequency that we meet, the work that's done behind the scenes in our working groups, and that was something that she wanted me to voice to our members, is just thanking all of our members for the great work that is done behind the scenes to be able to help the city and assist the city with the heritage resources. So again, as a member of Parliament, she was not aware of how much work lies on those shoulders of volunteers. So just a couple of things that came out. We also touched base with some people that are looking at organizing an event in September. So it's actually bringing forward some opportunities for our education working group that we can give them some resources to help their event that they're going to be having in September. So lots of good things came from that day. Then one other, I believe that they're looking at doing a similar event on a semi-annual basis. So something that the Culture Department may be touching base with us. They're looking at doing a volunteer awards in June, I believe it is. Is it June? No. But anyways, looking at having 2 events in a year, potentially something in September as well. So just a few points that came from that. Janice?
Yeah, I just want to add to what Alyssa said. I guess through the chair, or this is a little bit different. Thank you to Alyssa. She did a great job at Heritage Day. I was really impressed, as were the people sitting around there, just with the amount of information and how well it was delivered. And I encouraged her to take the show on the road, just so that we could promote and let people know a little bit more about heritage and all the things we do. Some good things have come out of that as far as promotion is concerned. Alyssa also talked about our Heritage Awards, and I was contacted by Brenda Duke, who does North End Breezes, and I passed it on to Alyssa, and we put together a document based on Alyssa's talk and what the awards are all about, and that's going to be in the North End Breezes, which I think is terrific. And the other thing is Hamilton Community Magazine are doing a digital project, and there are 28 folks throughout the city of Hamilton that have some wonderful heritage and historical knowledge, and just like Monique Taylor, knowing nothing about what was going on in the impact of Bill 23 or heritage, we've got a lot of new folks in Hamilton who do not know of our heritage, are really interested in our heritage. So there will be digital presentations from these 27 or 28 people, and I can see Alyssa's already got 2 great articles or 2 great digital presentations for the Hamilton City Magazine, that being the awards and that being the effects of Bill 23. Thank you, and that's thanks to Alyssa.
Janice likes giving me more work. Councillor Critch?
Thanks. I just wanted to make the committee aware of a couple things I've done since we had the discussion about Bill 23. One was I sent an email to all my council colleagues just saying two things. One, Bill 23 is real in a heritage way. Here's how it's real in a heritage way. Here's the increased workload in our staff and our volunteers. If any of you have any concerns about any issues that come up in your wards, please refer them directly to this committee. And then I've spoken about it twice in public on the same note at council and committee meetings to let them know what's happening, what the strain on our staff is going to be, what the strain on our volunteers are going to be, and just to kind of educate people about the work that gets done here, because I don't think it's necessarily obvious to everybody. It's also slightly confusing, because we have a permit review subcommittee, and then we have this committee, and like they both have the word heritage in them, and I know like that may seem obvious to everybody here, but in the wider universe of the millions of little meetings and subcommittees, it can be kind of confusing as to what the role and purpose of this one is. So just to let you know, I've been kind of like trying to educate people as much as possible because I know that it's not legible to everybody what the impacts of Bill 23 are to heritage.
That's great, and thank you for doing that, Councillor Crutch. So that's the update on Heritage Day, unless, go ahead, Robin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The event went well with the Hamilton Wentworth Heritage Association, and we negotiated with the city to have it at Dundurn Castle, and that's where I negotiated that the Municipal Heritage Committee be part of it, and they were the only group that would be able to get a table for display, and there was a display there for the Municipal Heritage Committee and the association. On top of that, what came out of the Heritage Day was that on April the 18th is the tentative date to go back to Dundurn Castle, and that's where the Heritage Volunteer Awards will be handed out by the Hamilton Wentworth Heritage Association in cooperation with the city, to be notified that the Bailey Award is back, and we're in negotiations right now for that April the 18th. That's why it's tentative, but it's close, and we're ready to hand out our Heritage Volunteer Awards. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. The other item that we'll talk about is 13.3 is Ontario Heritage Conference 2023 update. So at the last meeting, we had some request to get some information as to whether or not we could, if we had the budget, in order to allow a member or two or multiple members to go to this year's upcoming conference, which is taking place in London this June. So Alyssa, maybe you have an update.
Thanks, through the chair. Yes, so we do have the capacity to fund two to three members attending, whether that's commuting each day or staying over. It might actually come out in a wash in terms of the cost of gas and mileage versus staying over. According to the site, the early bird registration does end on May 15th. So recognizing we'll be in a state of transition in terms of who the new members will be. If the new committee has not been onboarded by that time, then we can just book 3 general registrations and then see who wants to attend once we have the new committee in place. Yes, good question, Lynn. 1 second. It's in June. Let me get the dates here. June 15th to 17th, although the key days are the Friday, Saturday. So that would be the 16th, 17th, although there is some opening reception stuff that happens usually on the Friday.
Through the chair, to anyone that has not attended, I would highly recommend you put your name forward, because it really is an interesting conference, and you meet some great people involved in what we're all doing. So just putting that out there for those of you that have not gone before.
Councillor Cringe.
Yeah, I would just posit that it's very likely these committee members will be the committee members, and Lorraine could confirm, but in past, What I mean by that is in past, when we've done the application process and selection for selection committees, that usually began in approximately November, and it usually wrapped up in approximately May. That we're starting this now, it's very unlikely that suddenly we'll wrap this process up by June 15th to 17th. It is certainly possible, but I was just like giving people's expectations that this committee may be functioning as such for longer than it may anticipate.
Through the chair, while I remain eternally optimistic, the recruitment that we are currently running is on a smaller scale than we normally do. So it is seen that it will take less time to schedule the meetings of the selection committee and get some members going. But while I would love to see all the same members, but there we go.
So Alyssa, do you need us to put forward a motion to request for, or just?
No, through the chair, we can go ahead and do that, but just maybe keep that in mind, and obviously, depending on where we're at, when we actually do the registration, we can check in and see if the new committee is in place, and we'll get confirmation of members as well.
Sounds good. Any other questions or discussion in regards to the conference? If not, may I have a motion to receive those updates for 13.2 and 13.3?
I see Councillor Crutch and I see Karen.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none. Do we have any new business today? So I guess the only thing that I would like to mention is that we need to welcome Matt Gauthier. So moving forward, Matt is going to be our new legislative coordinator. So welcome, Matt. We'll try to make things easy. It's a lot of challenging work. Sadly, what that means is we have to say goodbye to Lorraine. Yes. And Lorraine Kohler has been our legislative coordinator since 2014. So Lorraine has been here for a long time, and we are going to miss you greatly. You have been very patient with us, and you have been a constant source of support for us and all the work that you do. So with great gratitude from all of us, we want to thank you, Lorraine. Wish you best of luck with those are. Do you want a standing ovation? We should give her a standing ovation. But we wish you luck with your other committees. They're very lucky to have you, right? So. Is there any other business? If not, may I have a motion to adjourn today's meeting?
Seeing Councillor Crutch and I see Lynn.
No one opposed? Thank you, everyone, and we will see you at next month's meeting.
Thank you, everyone.